I always believed that after 40 years together, there was a kind of loyalty you could count on, a quiet agreement, unspoken but unbreakable. That belief kept me going through endless struggles, raising children, paying bills, watching our parents grow old and die, building a home brick by brick. I had stood beside my husband in sickness and in health, through job losses, through months when we barely had enough to buy groceries. I was proud of how we had built our lives together. That pride was what made me decide to plan something special for our 40th anniversary, something to remind us both of what we'd overcome. For weeks, I put my heart into planning. I polished our good silverware, ordered a cake with 40 years strong written in sugar roses, and set the table with soft candles and a bouquet of fresh lilies. I even called the kids to tell them there would be a surprise after dinner, just to get them to show up. A lifetime of small traditions had taught me that nothing feels more solid than sharing a meal together. As I adjusted the table one last time, smoothing the white cloth and checking the cutlery for smudges, my mind felt calm. I was sure this dinner would warm his heart, remind him of the best version of ourselves. But as the clock moved closer to 7, a strange anxiety twisted in my chest. He was late, not surprising, since work sometimes kept him longer, but tonight was different. I tried to silence the panic creeping up the back of my mind, but the minutes ticked by in slow torture. Finally, just past 8, the door opened. I hurried to greet him with a smile, determined to keep the atmosphere warm and hopeful. But instead of the husband I had known for 4 decades, I saw a stranger standing there. His suit looked too perfectly ironed, his hair too carefully styled, and next to him stood a woman young enough to be our daughter. She clung to his arm with a confidence that made my knees go weak. He didn't even look embarrassed. No apology, no hesitation. Just a cold, empty gaze that went straight through me. "I brought someone," he said flatly. I tried to keep breathing, tried to keep my smile from crumbling. Before I could say anything, he pulled out the woman's chair and motioned for her to sit at our anniversary table, the table I had set with my memories, my hopes, my love. That was when I saw it, the cruel smirk in his eyes. He was enjoying this. "Who is she?" I asked, my voice shaking so badly I barely recognized it. He laughed, the sound chilling. "Someone who makes me feel alive again," he said. "Unlike you." I felt the entire world tilt, like the floor had vanished beneath me. 40 years of loyalty, erased in one breath. I tried to swallow the bile rising in my throat, but he leaned closer, so close I could smell another woman's perfume on his collar. That's when he whispered, "Get out, old woman." It was a knife in my heart, twisting deeper with each word. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I watched them sit down, slice into the cake I had ordered, raise glasses of my husband's favorite wine like I was nothing more than a servant in my own house. My children arrived not long after, confused, asking what was going on. I couldn't explain. How do you explain 40 years of your life being ripped away in a single evening? He told them the same thing he told me, that he deserved happiness, and I had become a burden. My children looked at me, then back at him, torn between loyalty to their father and horror at what they were witnessing. I wanted to scream, to break every dish on that table. But I stayed silent, frozen by shock. If you've ever felt this kind of betrayal, if you know how it feels to be thrown away after giving someone your entire life, please know you are not alone. Feel free to share this story, or even subscribe to hear how I found the courage to stand up for myself, because I promise you, there is so much more I need to tell. As they laughed and toasted their new beginning, I slipped quietly to the corner of the dining room, sinking into a chair that felt cold and unfamiliar. I stared at the dancing candle flames, wondering how my life could change so brutally, so fast. I didn't know then that this was just the beginning of my battle. The first night of losing everything, and the first spark of fighting back. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them sitting at my table, slicing the cake I had chosen so carefully, raising their glasses to each other as if I had never existed. The smell of roses from the anniversary bouquet still lingered in the air, mixing with the sting of betrayal so sharp it left me breathless. I could hear them from the guest room where I tried to hide, their laughter ringing through the walls like a cruel reminder. She was half my age, with a voice full of bright, confident cruelty. She sounded so comfortable in my house, telling him which curtains were ugly, which furniture needed to go, speaking about my things like they were worthless trash. At first, I tried to tell myself this was a nightmare, a terrible dream that would vanish by morning. But there was nothing dreamlike about the way my husband ignored me, as if I were nothing more than a piece of dust to be swept aside. When the sun rose, I hoped, for one fragile moment, that he might come to his senses. 40 years of marriage had to count for something. But when I walked into the kitchen, I found her wearing my robe, drinking coffee from my favorite cup. The sight nearly made me collapse. She looked me up and down, a smirk on her lips. "Oh, you're still here?" she asked, like I was the one intruding. My husband stood beside her, his face as blank as ever. "You need to leave," he repeated. "This isn't your home anymore." My hands were shaking so hard I had to grip the counter to steady myself. "You can't do this," I whispered. "This is my house too. I have rights." He laughed, low and bitter. "Your rights ended the day you stopped making me happy," he said. The words burned more than any slap. I had carried this man through everything. I had held him up when he lost his job, when he was so sick he could barely stand. I had defended him in front of neighbors, family, friends. And this was how he repaid me? I looked at the woman again, sitting so comfortably, acting as if she'd always belonged here. She was giving him orders already, pointing to the walls, telling him how to redecorate, what she wanted to change. He nodded to everything she said, eager to please her like a puppy desperate for affection. It was humiliating. I felt stripped of every shred of dignity I had left. My children tried to call me later that day. I let the phone ring and ring, unable to face their questions. I knew they were worried, but I couldn't find the words to explain how their father had turned into a monster overnight. How he had invited another woman into our anniversary dinner, then tried to erase me from the home I had helped build. That afternoon, I stayed in the guest room, staring at the old family photos on the wall, our wedding day, birthdays, Christmas mornings. Every memory of love felt like a lie now. I wondered how many other lies he had told me over the years. The sounds of their laughter filled every corner of the house, echoing down hallways that once held our children's footsteps. Now it felt like I was the outsider, like I was intruding on a stranger's life. At one point, I heard her telling him, "We can change the locks tomorrow." My heart stopped. Change the locks? In my own house? Panic clawed at my chest, so powerful I thought I might faint. That was when, through the haze of heartbreak, something in me snapped awake. I remembered. A year ago, I had done something I thought was paranoid at the time. After a strange phone call I had overheard, I had transferred the house deed fully into my own name, just in case. I had forgotten about it until that moment. The papers were in a folder, hidden deep in the safe. My safe. Suddenly, I had a thin, trembling strand of hope. I waited until they went upstairs that night. I heard them, whispering, laughing together behind my closed bedroom door, tearing down my life one stolen moment at a time. Then, quietly, I crept to the safe, opened it, and pulled out the folder. There it was, the house deed, signed and sealed with only my name on it. My hand shook so badly I could barely hold the document, but it felt like breathing again after being underwater too long. They thought they could take everything from me. But they were wrong. This house was still mine. I stayed awake all night with that folder clutched in my hands, as if someone might try to rip it away. Every few minutes I opened it again, tracing my name on the deed to be sure it was real, that I hadn't imagined it. It was the only thing anchoring me to sanity. They thought they had won. They thought they could steal my house, my dignity, and my memories in one humiliating night. But they didn't know what I had done. Hours passed. I could hear their muffled voices behind my bedroom door, the bedroom that used to be mine, now invaded by someone who didn't even have the decency to wait until I was gone. There was a moment when I thought about barging in, screaming, pulling her out by the hair, demanding he look me in the eye and explain how he could do this. But that rage melted into something colder, sharper. I realized they didn't deserve to see me lose control. I had given them too much already. Instead, I decided to be patient. I waited for the sun to rise, all the while rehearsing the words I would say. I played out the scene over and over in my mind, each time growing stronger, until I felt almost steady again. When dawn finally arrived, I stepped into the kitchen, the deed in my hand. They were already awake, laughing over breakfast like nothing had happened. She was wearing another one of my robes, stirring sugar into my coffee cup. That image burned itself into my memory. She had no shame, no respect. He barely glanced at me. "Why are you still here?" he asked, as if I were a stain on the floor. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay calm. "We need to talk," I said. She rolled her eyes dramatically, but he nodded for me to continue. I placed the folder on the table with a quiet finality. "What's that?" he sneered. I pushed it closer to him. "Read it." He flipped through the pages, and at first, I saw the amusement on his face, like he thought this was some pathetic attempt to change his mind. But then, as the words sank in, his expression shifted. His mouth opened slightly, then closed, and his eyes darted back to me with a mixture of confusion and panic. This is a joke," he stammered. "It's not," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "The house is mine. Legally. Signed, notarized, and recorded. You can't change that." She tried to grab the papers from him, scanning them as if she might find a loophole. But there was none. "This can't be real," she snapped, glaring at me like I was dirt. "It's very real," I answered. "And I'm giving you both 24 hours to leave." For a moment, the kitchen was silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. I could almost taste their fear, how it curled around them like smoke. He tried to recover his composure, tried to act superior. "You wouldn't do that. You don't have the guts," he spat. I felt something inside me settle, like a final piece of a puzzle snapping into place. "Watch me," I told him. She laughed, a cruel, desperate sound, and tried to threaten me. "We'll sue you," she hissed. I almost laughed back. "Good luck," I replied. "Your name isn't on anything." They had assumed I was weak. That I would crumble and hand over everything I had built. That I was too old, too soft, too loyal to fight back. But they didn't know me anymore. Maybe they never really had. I spent the rest of that morning making arrangements. I called my lawyer, who confirmed exactly what I already knew: the house was 100% protected. I could evict them legally if they refused to go. By the afternoon, I had changed the locks on the spare entrance. I called my oldest son to explain what was happening. His voice trembled with anger and disbelief, but he promised to help me however I needed. A strange calm settled over me then. It was still painful, heartbreak, shame, humiliation, but for the first time since that terrible dinner, I felt like I could breathe. I had something to stand on. That night, while they whispered and schemed in what used to be my bedroom, I sat alone in the living room, hugging a cup of tea to my chest. I replayed every sacrifice I had made for him over 40 years, every moment I had chosen his dreams over mine, every time I had swallowed my own pride to lift him up. Now I was done. I didn't know exactly what tomorrow would bring. But at least, for the first time in decades, I was finally in control of something that was mine, and no one was going to take it away. I hardly slept that night, but it was a different kind of restlessness. It wasn't fear anymore. It wasn't confusion. It was a sharp, clear purpose that kept me awake, like a spark reigniting somewhere deep in my chest. For the first time since he walked through that door with his mistress, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the ghost of a woman. I felt like someone who still had a name, a backbone, a place. They had 24 hours. That was what I told them, and I intended to keep my word. I woke up before dawn, moving through the house as quietly as I could. It was strange, how even with all the humiliation and betrayal, this place still felt like mine. Every photo on the wall, every nick on the kitchen counter, every curtain I had sewn with my own hands. I had given this house a soul. When I stepped into the kitchen, they were already there, whispering urgently. I heard bits of their conversation. She was angry, telling him he'd promised her everything. He was trying to calm her down, saying he'd find a way to fix it. I stepped forward and placed the house keys on the table with a loud clack. They both jumped, startled, as if I'd appeared out of thin air. "Your time is up," I said. His face twisted into something ugly. "You're really doing this?" I didn't answer him directly. I didn't owe him explanations anymore. Instead, I looked right at the woman who thought she could slide into my place, slip into my bed, sip coffee from my cup, live in the walls I had built with 40 years of sweat and hope. "You need to leave," I told her calmly. She crossed her arms, defiant. "And if I don't?" I almost smiled. "Then the sheriff will help you," I said. "You have no right to be here. You never did." Her confidence cracked, just for a second. It was enough. "My husband," I almost laughed at still calling him that, tried to protest. "You can't throw me out of my own house." I took a steady breath. "It's not your house," I reminded him. "Read the deed again if you forgot." He slammed his hand against the table, eyes bulging. "You're nothing without me," he spat. "Who's going to want you now?" Those words should have hurt, but they didn't. For the first time in a long time, I saw him clearly. Just a small, weak man who needed to break me to feel powerful. I straightened my back. "I'd rather be alone than share my life with a coward," I told him. The woman opened her mouth to say something, but then snapped it shut. Maybe she realized there was no money, no security, no future in staying. Maybe she was calculating her next move already. That wasn't my problem anymore. I gave them until noon to pack their things. Then I went to the porch, breathing the crisp morning air. My hands were shaking, but inside, I felt calm. Stronger. It's a strange thing, what betrayal can do to you. It can destroy you, or it can free you. I watched as they stuffed clothes into garbage bags. I heard them arguing about what to take, who should pay for what. I didn't step in. Let them fight among themselves. My oldest son arrived to support me. He stood by the door, silent but solid, as if to guard me against any last-minute cruelty. When he hugged me, I felt years of pain collapse inside my chest. "You're not alone," he whispered. For the first time in days, I believed it. At exactly noon, I changed the locks. I had the locksmith waiting. My husband screamed at me, tried to guilt me, to break me with cheap apologies and empty promises. But it was too late. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, listening to their footsteps fade down the driveway. My legs trembled so badly I thought I might fall, but I didn't. I walked through each room after they were gone, touching the walls, reclaiming my space. Even if everything was broken, even if the memories were poisoned, this was still my home. I had earned every inch of it. That afternoon, I made myself a cup of tea, sat at the kitchen table, and let myself cry, really cry, for everything I had lost. For the marriage, the illusions, the wasted loyalty. But underneath the grief, there was something else, relief. They were gone. And I was still here. No one was going to take that away from me ever again. The silence after they left was deafening. For a while, I stood in the middle of the hallway, listening for sounds that were no longer there, no footsteps, no laughter, no mocking voices, no insults. Just emptiness. It was strange how a house could feel so heavy and yet so light at the same time. There were pieces of me scattered in every corner, photos on the walls, the dishes I had chosen so many years ago, the curtains I had sewn with my own hands. The walls felt scarred, but still standing, like me. I moved through each room slowly, as if reacquainting myself with an old friend I'd lost. There were moments that brought me to tears, our wedding picture in the hallway, my children's framed school photos, the kitchen table where we had celebrated so many birthdays. I grieved for what those memories used to mean, because they would never feel the same again. But I refused to let him, or her, erase my story from this house. By midday, I had stripped their sheets from my bed, opened every window to let in the sunlight, and burned the candles I had saved for special occasions. This was special enough. It was the day I reclaimed my home. I washed every dish, wiped down the counters, and vacuumed every room. It was as if I was purging their presence from every surface, reminding the walls who really belonged here. My children came that afternoon, one by one, to check on me. They were worried, of course they were, but I showed them the deed with my name on it. I showed them I was safe, and in control. The pride in their faces was worth more than any apology my husband might have tried to offer. They asked if I was sure about throwing him out. If I felt guilty. No. There was no guilt left in me. Only exhaustion, and a strange, unexpected sense of peace. That night, I sat on my freshly made bed, staring at the ceiling. It felt so quiet I could hear my own breathing, steady and calm for the first time in days. I thought about the woman he had chosen. About the smug confidence she carried, how sure she was that she could replace me. It hurt, of course it did, but a part of me pitied her. She had no idea what kind of man she had claimed. He would do it to her, too, someday. Because a man who can betray a partner of 40 years will always betray again. I refused to let him define me. I refused to let him break me. The next morning, I made my own breakfast, strong coffee, and toast with butter. I sat on the porch in the sun, feeling the warmth on my face, and for the first time in a long time, I realized I could make my own choices again. I could decide where to go, what to do, without asking permission or worrying about his moods. I was still grieving, yes. A part of me probably always would. But I was also free. Free to laugh again. Free to rest. Free to hope. And in that freedom, I discovered something I never expected: I wasn't finished yet. There was still a whole life ahead of me, even after 40 years with a man who couldn't see my worth. If you've ever felt discarded, like you meant nothing, please remember this: you can still rise. You can still reclaim your place, your name, your dignity. No matter what they take from you, they can never take your right to begin again. As I closed my journal that evening, I realized I wanted others to hear my story. I didn't want it to disappear in silence, because someone else, somewhere, might need to know they're not alone. So if this story touched you, if it made you see your own worth again, please consider sharing it. You can like, comment, even subscribe, because every time a story like this is told, another woman somewhere finds her courage. And sometimes, that small act of courage is enough to change a life.